Can somebody please bring me the book of the Lord of the Rings? Is the Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, equal to this?
King stands alone, not alone. Rohirrim! To the king!
One thing is though, they are extraordinarily different, but not in the ways that you might assume. This week, I will be reviewing The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, keeping in mind the changes made by the movies. Check out my other reviews of fantasy novels. And like Gandalf, smote the ruins of the subscribe button and the like button onto the screen. If you want an age rating, go to my first Lord of the Rings video. Cello wasn't that scary in the books. So, on with the review. Plot, 6 out of 10, but 7 out of 10. This is the weird part. There wasn't really a third act, as Helm's Deep, the high point of the entire book, was in the middle. This is the reason the movies changed the entire pacing of The Two Towers. Because Tolkien meant The Lord of the Rings to be one single book, but the publishers wouldn't have it. The reason? Crap. Can somebody please bring me the book of the Lord of the Rings? I forgot it. Thank you. I can see why. Because of this, The Two Towers was paced very oddly, because it wasn't meant to be standalone. If you look at it without any context, 6 out of 10. If you look at it with context, as part of the whole, 7 out of 10. Now, with that off our shoulders, let's get on to the actual plot. In the books, Helm's Deep was a single chapter, and a rather small one at that. And The Two Towers was mostly comprised of everything between the action. The movies ended at the same place as the books though, with Frodo and Sam being let go by Faramir. Aragorn also was not thrown off a cliff, and stayed with the company until Helm's Deep, for there was no warg ambush. The book spent more time on the journey, expanding on the antagonistic but allied relationship between Saruman and Sauron. Also, the Nazgûl flew about a lot more, especially after Helm's Deep. The book spent, again, a lot more time on the aftermath. On Frodo, Sam, and Gollum's side, they made a few changes. For one, Gollum didn't actually frame Sam, as Frodo in the books would never ever let go of Sam. This didn't mean though that Gollum wasn't crafty. I'll get into more detail with that when we get to the character section. Another change was Sam's speech. In the book, he had been provoked by Faramir into anger so as to reveal what they were carrying. The speech was made much more in anger than in the movies, as well as the situation was much less urgent. The reason for that was because they had never been taken to Osgiliath and had stayed at the Forbidden Pool. What I will say though is the lack of alternating POV chapters, as most modern fantasy writers would have it. Tolkien went all the way from Boromir's death to after Helm's Deep before he actually changed to Frodo and Sam. And then we were sent back to Frodo and Sam right after they had left Boromir and everybody else of the Fellowship. Strange, very, very strange. So, did the movies do it better? But wait, there is more. Characters, 9 out of 10. This time, there was definite improvement, as Legolas was given much more depth. Through the subtext and the word choice during his conversations, it showed very subtly how negative he was. Tolkien did it much better than the movie actually, as in the movie, Legolas showed his negativity through a much more blunt route. The pair, Gimli and Legolas, contrasted very well and enhanced each other through it, exactly the same as the movies. Aragorn though, was much less resistant to the prospect of becoming king after Boromir's death, unlike the movies. When it came to the Rohan characters though, what was seen in the movie was basically the same as the books, but with much more scenes, of course. The small but important changes to Gollum in the movies were not as good as the books, for in the book he was much more subtle about his way of gaining your pity and manipulating the characters. I actually recognize a few things that he said as being very similar to what other people said on the internet. Well, now I know what Tolkien would have thought of them. Veronwë in the books was much more noble and crafty, as was able to wheedle out the information about the ring from Sam and Frodo. In the end though, before he went out to Osgiliath, he let them go after being told off by a very angry Sam, who challenged him to be better than his brother. You might be asking, what about the Ents? Next up, world building. And I included the Ents underneath that, as they were more forces of nature than characters. World building, 8 out of 10. This time though, it was much more long-winded than the first book, as a bunch of very beautiful but annoying songs were sung about the land and Boromir's death. It did not make you sit on the edge of your seat like the last time there were such exposition dumps, but I would still call them very beautiful. Now, about the Ents. In the book, they felt much older and their backstory was very interesting. The song sung by Treebeard did not suffer from the same limitations as the previous songs, as it was an interesting format of a dialogue between an Ent and an Ent wife. Tolkien really nailed the feeling of a world in decline, heavily enhanced by the sorrow of the Ents. But in the movies, the Ents were more epic. The reason is that in the book, they were much less resistant to the idea of attacking Saruman's Orthanc. Actually, they had wanted to for some time, I think. So, when Treebeard roared in the movies and summoned the Ents for the last battle of the Ents, it was much more epic. So the movies, in the end, did it better. Overall, 8 out of 10. Exactly the same as the first. So, did the movies fall short of the books, or did it surpass? In this specific book, they surpassed. When I reach the end of The Lord of the Rings, I'll give an overall comparative analysis of the movies and the books. But for now, the Two Towers movie was better than the book. Possibly the most inspirational speech of all time by Samwise Gamgee, the roar of Treebeard, Gandalf appearing at dawn. Unfortunately for the books, the movies really surpassed them in epicness. But did the Return of the King surpass as well? We shall see. For now, Veronwë out.